"Oh, man," the woman groaned, rolling over in the bed. She opened one eye enough to see the clock on the bedside table. Black screen, off. Nothing, nada. "Joy," she muttered sarcastically. Raising her left hand, she squinted down at the fitness-type watch on her wrist. Usually movement would cause the screen to light up and display the face and digital clock. This time, however, it remained blank. Puzzled, she glanced at the blackout curtains, seeing a bit of light streaming through a gap where the drapes met. Well, it was daytime at least. That's weird. She was listening to see if she could hear any sound outside the bedroom. Another look at the bit of sunlight, and she sat up, throwing aside the sheet that had covered her, and swung around to sit on the side of the bed. She was a bit puzzled that her husband, a police officer with the local small-town police department, hadn't come home yet following his all-night shift. Usually by this time of day, he and Dakota, his canine partner, would be home, and there'd be the sound of the ever-present television blaring from the living room. But the silence, a weirdly oppressive silence, was all she could hear, or not hear as the case may be. Then in the quiet, she heard the hourly chime from the grandfather clock in the living room as it started sounding. She counted off the sonorous dongs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. She expected it to stop at that, but 9. Finally followed by silence. 9! What's going on? Where's Wade? Then, remembering the confrontation between them yesterday evening before he and Dakota had left for work, she shrugged. Oh, yeah. He's probably over at her place. Mentally dismissing him, not surprised there was no pain at finally having proof of his cheating. Then, wondering if he'd tried to call, she reached over and picked up the slim smartphone laying face down on the nightstand. Dead. Great, she muttered aloud. It's even plugged in. She fiddled with it, pressing the side button that would turn it on, but nothing. It was obviously dead. Great, she repeated with a heavy dose of sarcasm. Suddenly aware of the need to empty her bladder, she stood up and hurried into the ensuite bathroom. The small room, decorated in soothing teals and aquas, was lit by morning sunlight through the frosted window above the deep bath. She admired the look while taking care of business. She noticed that when she flushed afterward, the bowl didn't refill like it usually did, but she just put it down to a day that was already promising to be a doozy. Moments later, she stepped into the glass-walled shower and turned on the water, thankful for the steady stream. She was shocked when, after a few minutes, the temperature seemed to cool down before she had even managed to rinse the soap shampoo from her hair. With a yelp, she quickly finished rinsing off, shivering. She was glad it was still summer in Texas, where the cold water didn't get much cooler than 70 degrees, but that was cool enough to cause some discomfort. As she reached to turn off the water, she was surprised when the flow slowed down to a bare trickle. What the? Rolling her eyes, she shrugged and stepped out of the shower, snagging a thin teal bath towel hanging on a hook outside the shower door. Then she bent over and wrapped the towel turban-style around her wet middle of the back hair. Then she stood up, grabbed the thick, fluffy purple towel hanging next to it, and began toweling off. As she wiped the water off her skin, she studied herself rather dispassionately in the mirror above the double sink counter. As always, critical of the wide hips and sturdy thighs. She didn't notice the small waist, her still firm size 38C breast, or her strong shoulders and fine complexion. Neither did she notice her clear gray-blue eyes and naturally dark lashes, or the straight nose above full lips. She pulled the towel off her head and studied the naturally streaked dark blonde hair, which, when dry, would hang to the center of her back. Pulling the strands over her shoulder to the front, she used the towel to squeeze the moisture out, glancing away and habitually dismissing her appearance. Once her hair was semi-dry, she quickly braided it into a French braid, a single long rope hanging down the center of her back. She liked long hair, but couldn't stand it blowing in her face, and the easiest way to wear it was to do a braid. Besides, it ticked off her soon-to-be-gone philandering husband, who wanted her to keep her hair curly and white blonde. He didn't understand that much processing would ruin her hair. So she did what she wanted with her hair. Better be glad I didn't cut it into a pixie, since he liked the length. Before leaving the room, she glanced at the bathroom scales in the corner, tempted as always to step on them like she used to do every morning. But Liz knew that if she did, she would once again hear the echo of her mother saying, "I'm fat," every time she had stepped on the scales. Her mother had no idea what her self-critical words were doing to the little girl, Liz, as she watched. Little Liz had absorbed what her mother did, so much so that at 5 years old, when she stepped on the old bathroom scales in her grandma's bathroom and watched as the dial stopped spinning with the red arrow pointing to 55, she repeated her mother's words, "I'm fat." From that point, it seemed that Liz was forever critical of her weight. By the time she was in high school, she was constantly comparing her shape to that of her classmates. She had never seen it, even when she was smaller than her friends. Only recently had she come to realize just how screwed up that thinking was. She had changed her inner mantra from "I'm fat" to "I am fearfully and wonderfully made in the image of God." Gradually, she accepted that she had a decent body, not fat at all, and she certainly wasn't overweight. She just wasn't the twig so idealized by society. She'd also begun praising and thanking God for making her just like she was. She noticed that the more she praised Him and spoke blessings over her body and mind, the less critical she was. So, with a whispered, "Thank you, Father," she turned away and hurried into the bedroom to get dressed. She listened as the quarter-hour ding sounded from the grandfather clock. While it had only taken her about 15 minutes to shower, dry, and braid her hair, she was beginning to experience an unusual sense of urgency. This was unusual because she worked from home, so she had no particular schedule to keep. But for some reason, she felt like she needed to get moving, to do something. Standing in front of the closet, she donned cotton panties and a purple sports bra. She then stepped into stretched denim jeans with the side and back pockets, sliding them easily up over her hips. Finally, she pulled a sleeveless teal and purple floral tank top off a hanger and put it on, tugging the hem down over her hips. As she passed her dresser on the way to the door, she pulled open her sock drawer, dug out a pair of purple footy socks, and donned them. Then she opened the bedroom door and stepped out into the hall, once again noticing the unusual quiet of the house. Down the hall she moved, glancing into the spare bedroom, wondering if Wade was in the one that now held all his things. After the ultimatum she'd given him last night, he knew better than to try and darken her bedroom door. Cheating scumbag. But no, it was empty. She told him, in no uncertain terms, she wouldn't have a cheating man sleeping in her bed, bringing home who knows what all kinds of diseases. Then she spent the rest of the evening moving his stuff out of their shared closet and dumping it on the bed in one of the spare bedrooms. "Okay, then," she commented into the quiet, moving on into the kitchen, glancing with some pride at the 5-tray Harvest Right freeze dryer standing in the corner. As expected, Wade had mocked and criticized her when she'd bought this freeze dryer last year, never having been on board with her prepping tendencies. She had just ignored him like she'd learned to do in their 10 years of marriage. Tendencies, she thought cynically. He had had no idea just how much of her income from the sale of her self-published romance novels went towards her preps, mainly because most of it was stored over at the U-Haul storage facility about 2 miles from their neighborhood. Quickly popping a pod of pumpkin-flavored coffee into the coffee maker, she flipped the toggle button to get it brewing, only to be disappointed when it didn't start. In fact, that's when she noticed that the clock on the microwave oven was dark, like her smartphone. A small fissure of apprehension shivered down her spine. She dismissed the apprehension, figuring a breaker had tripped. Not unusual occurrence in this older house she'd inherited from her grandmother. However, a quick check at the breaker box in the utility room next to the kitchen showed all of the switches were, in fact, all pointing up as they should be. However, just in case, she still flipped them all down and back up, noticing that nothing happened. anywhere. Again, the shiver down her spine. Something was definitely wrong, and remembering the fear she'd felt in her dream just before waking up, she wasn't sure she was ready to find out yet. Pushing the fear aside, she opened the right-hand door of the double-wide refrigerator-freezer combo. It was cold, but the light didn't come on. She pressed her hand against the side of the Frigidaire, side-by-side refrigerator, and listened. No familiar hum or slight vibration. Dead. Okay, power's out. No need to panic. But what is going on? She wondered, avoiding the answer her prepper-trained mind was trying to supply by pointing out that a house or even local power outage would not affect her watch or phone. Nope, not going there. She grabbed her favorite mocha latte protein shake from a recessed shelf in the refrigerator door and quickly closed the door to keep the cold in. After twisting the top off the shake and tossing the plastic cap into the trash on the end of the counter, she took a swig. She breathed. That's more like it. Then she picked up the 7-day pill dispenser off the back of the counter, flipped open the lid off the chamber for Friday, and poured out the contents in the palm of her left hand, silently identifying each one. Vitamin C, D3, zinc, magnesium, potassium, and selenium, as well as a large multivitamin. She tossed them to the back of her mouth and took another big swig of the shake. Guess this will have to be my coffee this morning, figuring she could stop at the little coffee shop in town if needed. Still holding the chocolatey coffee goodness, she grabbed the black leather crossbody bag hanging on a hook next to the back door and the wristlet leather keychain hanging next to it. By habit, she locked the door behind her before crossing under the carport to her 1979 fully restored Chevy Suburban 4x4 SUV. While she hated the two-toned brown and tan color, she loved the vehicle she'd dubbed Tank. She affectionately patted the hood as she moved around the vehicle to the driver's side, opening the door and climbing in. Settling in behind the steering wheel, she hoped that if what she was beginning to suspect had really, finally, and she wasn't even ready to put words to it, happened, that her old pre-computer chip SUV would start. Whew, thank you, Lord, she sent skyward as the vehicle started right up. Looking over her shoulder, she backed out of the drive and onto the narrow street running through the older tree-lined neighborhood. That's when she noticed the next anomaly in a list that was starting to grow. It looked like none of her neighbors had left for work this Friday morning. The normally empty driveways were still full of the various vehicles she saw every other weekend or evening. 2 little lines appeared between her dark blonde eyebrows. What is going on? She asked of nobody. Not a single living being was in sight. No one was mowing the lawns. No sprinklers were running. No one walked their dog trying to get ahead of the oppressive heat of North Texas, even in this first week of September. She shivered, again getting a flash of the dream she'd had just before waking up. Usually she didn't remember her dreams, and the ones she did recall upon waking, as much as she avoided admitting it, often proved to be somewhat prophetic. But she did not want to remember last night's dream. It had scared her, and while she was not going to think about the details that had been so vivid in the dream, what she did remember right then were the bright green eyes. There'd been no sense of threat from the eyes, which was weird since the rest of the dream had felt so ominous. Stuffing the thought aside, she drove out of the neighborhood, turning onto the road that would lead into town. She noticed that the field of corn on the other side of the farm-to-market road was probably ready for harvesting. At the first week of September was when the farmer who owned the field had always harvested in the past. But today the field lay quiet, the tops of the cornstalks swaying in the gentle mid-morning breeze. Glancing at the analog dash clock, Liz noted that it was now 9:40, and she was pretty sure she'd either find Wade at the police station or over at his girlfriend's house, although why he hadn't dropped Dakota off at home had her puzzled. She felt a pang as she realized that when Wade did move out, he'd take his canine partner with him. She smiled somewhat bitterly as she admitted to herself she'd miss the dog more than her angry, emotionally abusive husband. So much for love and cherish. Oh well, she wasn't going to worry about the philandering cheat. She was done with him. But she figured her best bet for finding out what was going on would be the police department.